Chapter 11. When we entered Pastor's office, my lips were slightly swollen. I knew I looked like I'd recently been well kissed, but wasn't concerned. There was peace in my heart, with the knowledge that Roberto was the man God intended for me. Also, Roberto had agreed we needed to move up our wedding date. Now we were looking at the first of the year, which, with the way time was flying by, wouldn't be long at all. I could feel happiness and contentment radiating out of me. Pastor Williams greeted us, his impassive face noting our clasped hands and smiling features.
Before we get started, let us pray.
I stood quietly while he prayed. Once amen was said, I turned and sat in the seat furthest away from the door. Roberto nudged his chair over until the arms touched before taking his seat. He immediately reclaimed my hand. I confess my mind was more on those last few minutes in the car and the pleasurable time to come when we got back to the house than what Pastor was saying as he and Roberto exchanged chit-chat. I came back to the here and now when Pastor said,
Sister Nina, I understand Justin is staying with you.
For the time being.
And whose idea was this?
He asked.
Justin's.
Roberto responded.
You approve?
Pastor seemed surprised.
We discussed it and decided for now, considering everything that's happened, it might be best.
Roberto explained. I smiled at him, remembering the way our discussion had been conducted.
I see.
Pastor stated, somewhat grimly.
During our last session, I gave you a homework assignment. Have you completed it?
Yes.
Roberto's response, coupled with the look he gave me, was filled with so much sensual satisfaction, I inwardly groaned. Pastor studied us intently, his gaze bouncing back and forth suspiciously between the two of us, as I fought to keep my expression neutral. Right then, his phone rang.
Excuse me a moment.
I leaned over to Roberto and murmured, Stop looking at me like that. His eyebrows shot up, and a small grin graced his face.
Like what?
He asked innocently, but the glint in his eyes showed he knew exactly what he was doing. This time, I let the groan out and rested my forehead on his shoulder. Oh.
Is everything okay, sister?
Straightening, I responded to Pastor's query. Just fine.
Roberto?
Couldn't be better.
He brought my hand to his mouth and kissed my fingers before returning our linked hands to his thigh where they rested.
Much has happened since we last met.
Pastor continued, after another intent gaze at us.
Some issues have come to light that, I must say, have me concerned.
He paused, his gaze bouncing between the two of us before coming to rest on me.
I had an interesting conversation with our newest candidate for membership. From what Brother Parker stated, you two know each other quite well.
His gaze drilled into mine, like he was trying to see into my soul. We work together, I said calmly. I didn't know what Ron was up to by coming to Pastor, but I could guess. It seemed Roberto had the same suspicions I did, for his thigh tensed beneath my hand.
He implied it was more.
Pastor countered, still examining me in a manner I was beginning to find quite annoying.
They used to be engaged.
Roberto interjected. Pastor's eyes opened wide, and he settled against the wide back of his chair.
So you're aware of their relationship?
Nina and I have been very open about our pasts with each other.
Roberto placed special emphasis on the word pasts.
I see. And were you also aware this relationship was very sexual in nature?
Pastor asked, his disapproval clear, his eyes still on me. I felt annoyance edge into anger. My past was none of Pastor's business. What happened was between God, Ron, and I, and now Roberto. How dare he sit in judgment on me for something which took place years ago? Once I repented, it was under the blood. It didn't matter that Pastor was just now discovering my transgression. We weren't Catholic, and I didn't have to confess anything to him. I took my sins straight to God, where they belonged.
As I stated, we were both very honest.
Roberto reiterated.
Hmm.
Pastor rested his chin on thumb, his forefinger beside his nose as he sat in thought for a minute. I could tell that Roberto's lack of reaction wasn't pleasing to him. However, I knew Roberto's blandness was a front. I could feel the anger in him. I remembered him saying if Ron became a problem, he'd deal with him. I immediately began to pray for peace. Pastor dropped his hand and rocked back in his chair, arms folded across his chest.
Sister Wallace, Brother Roberto has stated several times his belief God chose you to be his wife. You've yet to say the same, despite my repeated asking. I'll ask again. Is it your belief God has ordained Brother Ortega to be your husband?
Roberto went still, and I turned to him. Despite his calm demeanor, there was a hint of worry in his eyes. I clutched his fingers a little tighter and smiled as I answered. Yes. There was a wealth of assurance in that single word. Roberto exhaled, and I realized he'd been holding his breath.
Finally,
He murmured. What can I say? Sometimes I'm a little slow, I confessed with a grin. Pastor Williams interrupted our moment.
I had a disturbing phone call this week from another co-worker of yours. This gentleman states God says he's your husband and asked my permission to date you. He said that you told him to do so.
It was my turn to freeze, this time in disbelief. Timothy wouldn't dare. But apparently, he had. I would have a few choice words for him come Monday.
I seem to remember you coming to me not too long ago with some dreams you were having about a gentleman. You believed they meant he was your husband. Didn't you tell me he was a co-worker?
That was 2 years ago, and yes, he was, I corrected.
Is this the same gentleman?
Pastor asked. Yes.
But now you're claiming Roberto is your husband.
Yes.
So, you're saying God changed his mind?
His expression showed what Pastor thought of that.
did this guy also tell you that despite his belief God intended Nina to be his wife, he willingly and knowingly asked another woman to marry him?
Roberto asked.
I don't believe that came up in the conversation. What about Brother Parker? What happened with him?
He asked me. Ron prayed for God to change him and asked God to give him someone. Only when God did what he asked, he fought God and me. He decided he preferred his old manner of living to the life God was trying to bring him into, and subsequently turned away from the faith. I stated quietly. I left out the part where the man tried to destroy me in the process because being with me reminded him of everything he was rejecting from God. He turned his back on God and did his best to get me to join him in his rebellion.
You're saying God brought the two of you together?
Pastor said dubiously. In the beginning, yes. I was uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was heading, but refused to let it show. Sometimes talking with Pastor was like dealing with a predator. You couldn't reveal the slightest weakness, or he'd pounce.
Let me make sure I understand you correctly. You're claiming in the last 3 or so years, God has revealed to you that 3 different men were your husband?
Both his facial expression and tone showed Pastor found that to be highly doubtful. It was more like 5 or 6 years, but who was I to quibble over the time frame? I simply nodded in reply.
Brother Ortega, I have a problem with this. I think you need to go and re-pray your decision.
Pastor stated.
I don't need to re-pray anything. I know what I know.
Roberto stated firmly. Pastor leaned forward and placed his folded arms on the desk.
In good conscience, I can't give my blessing to this union. I'll admit I've had my doubts from the beginning.
He turned to me.
Brother Roberto is being considered for the position of youth pastor, and frankly, I'm not sure you're suited to be a minister's wife. While you're a good leader, you don't know how to submit to authority. In fact, you're downright rebellious.
Youth pastor? I thought you had to be licensed to hold that position, I said, bewildered. While I wasn't pleased with Pastor's opinion of me, it wasn't surprising. I'd long suspected he felt this way, and while, yes, it hurt having my suspicions confirmed, I had more important things on my mind at the moment. Roberto shot me a "where have you been" look.
Nina, I'm licensed and ordained. I was my unit's chaplain, you had to know.
He stated, sounding annoyed at having to restate the obvious. Then he turned to Pastor Williams, who, judging by his tone, was the real source of his aggravation.
And Nina is very submissive. She only has problems with you.
You're a minister? I snatched my hand out of his, horrified.
And why is that?
Pastor asked. Like a pot which had reached its boiling point, I bubbled over. Maybe, 'cause you're always trying to get inside my head. When you say jump, you expect me to ask, how high? You're neither my father nor my shrink, and I wish you'd stop acting like both. You're my pastor, and I have great respect for your position. When you stand behind the pulpit, I treat every word you say as if it came from God himself. But outside of it, you're just a man. There was so much disdain and bitterness in the word man, even I flinched, and then closed my eyes. Conviction hit immediately. Lord, forgive me, I prayed. Opening my eyes, I gazed at Pastor, who still appeared stunned by my outburst. I'm sorry. That was uncalled for. I sat quietly, waiting for him to lay into me. I didn't dare look at Roberto for his reaction.
You said it was uncalled for, not that you didn't mean it.
Pastor said, in a low voice. I didn't respond. What I said was disrespectful, but I wouldn't add to my sin by lying and saying I hadn't meant it. Roberto put his arm around me, silently offering comfort. I laid my forehead against his shoulder and closed my eyes, unable to believe what I'd done. I'd long ago learned discretion, and since I hate to apologize, was usually very careful about the words I spoke. Unfortunately, these feelings had been building in me for quite some time, and Pastor happened to catch me at a raw moment, when I was already off-balanced by Roberto's revelation. Silence grew. Not a comfortable one, but the calm right before the back end of a hurricane, the strongest part of the storm, hammered the hell out of everything. I mentally braced myself. It was a sure thing. Any hope we might have had of Pastor approving our marriage was gone now. I wasn't sure Roberto would marry me without it, and even less sure if I would go along with it if he did. Finally, Pastor spoke.
Your grandfather was a bishop, wasn't he?
Yes, I replied cautiously.
People still speak of him with great respect, even though he's been gone how many years now?
I peeked out at him. 10 years. He was a good man.
Your mother's a minister as well, isn't she?
She took the ministerial training, but was never licensed. My whole family was full of missionaries, ministers, and preachers. I wondered what this had to do with anything.
So you've been in the church your whole life?
Pastor concluded. I straightened in my seat with a sigh, laying my hand on Roberto's thigh instead of the armrest. Yes. I didn't know where he was headed with this, but I'd promised Roberto no more running off in a huff or because things got uncomfortable. I was stuck here until Pastor decided to call a halt to whatever game he was playing. Pastor examined me.
Roberto's right. You don't have a problem with authority. Not one leader you've been assigned to has come to me and complained about you trying to take over or being difficult to work with. You simply jump right in and do what's necessary. So I have to ask myself, what would make a woman who grew up in the ministry have such disdain for her own pastor?
Since I just told him what the issue was, I kept my mouth shut. Not my problem if he didn't believe me. Pastor steepled his hands in front of him and brought his fingers to his lips while eyeing me. I kept my mouth straight and my eyes blank, refusing to let him see his regard was getting to me.
You've been at this church how long?
Pastor inquired. Doing some quick mental calculations, I replied, 11 years.
You came here from another church.
I shifted in my seat. Yes.
Which one?
Mount Olive, I stated, not too happy with this new tangent the conversation had taken.
And the pastor, what was his name?
Pastor asked. I forced myself to say his name, calmly and smoothly, giving no hint of the riot of emotions going on internally at the mere thought of the man. I didn't realize my nails were digging into Roberto's thigh until he pried my fingers loose. I folded my arms across my chest and met Pastor's stare as though the first one to blink or look away lost the game. Inwardly, I completely shut down. My face set like it had been freeze-dried.
I see. I'm acquainted with him,
Pastor said slowly. There was a knowing look in his eyes. After studying me what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes, he straightened abruptly.
I owe you an apology. You're right. I'm not your father, nor your shrink. I shouldn't have tried to force you into confiding in me, or attempted to counsel you when you neither asked for nor desired it.
He stood and came around his desk with his arms opened. I rose and allowed him to hug me.
Despite our disagreements, I want you to know I love you. I'm concerned about you and pray constantly for you and your family. If I've said or done anything to make you think otherwise, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me?
He placed his hands on my shoulders and stood looking down at me. I nodded, for not to do so would be churlish. Besides, I now realized baggage I carried had prevented me from having a better relationship with Pastor. He turned to Roberto.
I take back my objection to this union. When you two decide the time is right, I'll be more than happy to marry you. In the meantime, I'd like for you to continue counseling. Nina, I'll have my wife come sit in on the sessions, and she can give you an idea of what life as a minister's wife is like. You need to be prepared.
He held out a hand to Roberto, who stood and took it, and offered me his left one. As we joined hands, Pastor said,
I think we've covered enough ground tonight. Let us pray.
After we finished, and before releasing me, Pastor had one last thing to say.
Nina, I know you don't want to discuss it with me, but I urge you to talk with Roberto.
I made a non-committal reply and pulled away to reach for my purse on the floor by my seat. I could feel Roberto's curiosity like a living, breathing entity, but he didn't say a word, just placed his hand on the small of my back and escorted me out of the office. The ride back to the house was silent. I knew Roberto was biding his time and questions would be forthcoming, but frankly, I was hoping he'd leave it alone. Pastor had stirred up some memories from a dark period in my life. Things I'd done my best to bury and forget ever happened. Who knew the man would grab a shovel and go digging? Now I was left with all these emotions, and not good ones. I doubted Roberto would let me get away with avoidance, my preferred method of dealing with things I found difficult or troublesome. But so far, so good. Now all I needed was for Justin to be home when we arrived. Roberto would want privacy, something Justin felt it his duty to deny us. We pulled up in the yard. No Justin. Feeling like a hostile witness about to take the stand, I got out of the car.